Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about Dora and the Lost City of Gold. I have no real nostalgia for Dora. I'm too old to have grown up with it, and my daughter was never into it. I'm coming to this completely kind of blind. I've seen a few episodes. My daughter's watched a few, but it's not like her favorite or anything. I have no real sheen for oh, remember when Dora did this? I'm where she talks to the camera and says, what do you think, kids? And she stares at you for a while and your kid doesn't say anything and it's super awkward, and that's my experience with Dora. In a lot of ways, I feel like this film and the filmmakers don't really have that either. James Bobbin, who is a director I like, he helped create Flight of the Conchords. He directed the two Muppet movies, the most recent Muppet movies, The Muppets and The Muppets Most Wanted. It's also co-written by Nick Stoller, who also wrote those movies and did Get Him to the Greek and even helped write and direct The Storks, I think, and has done a lot of stuff. And they're both people I enjoy. But at the same time, it feels like they kind of don't really have any necessarily love for this character, other than that they were kind of given this property by Paramount and they were asked to do something interesting with it. And I think sort of they do, but that's kind of the interesting thing about it, where I almost feel like at the essence, this is a property that probably should have waited 10 more years before making this kind of a movie. But Nick Stoller and James Bobbin are able to kind of use how good they are making family entertainment, which I think the Muppet movies proved. They're films that I hear talked about a lot in terms of films people watch with their kids, more modern ones, not as much as the Jim Henson ones, but that's a whole other story. I think that they have a certain life and energy and a subversiveness to them, and will make kind of weirder, kind of funkier jokes that definitely work in a kid's film, none that are inappropriate or anything that flow with it. And in a lot of ways, this film reminds me of something like Jumanji: Welcome to the Jungle, which is kind of a great family adventure entertainment movie that you can all sit down with on a Saturday night, the whole family, eat some pizza and laugh and have a good time. And now that I have a family of my own, I could totally see doing that with this film. But the problem, I think, ultimately with a lot of what James Bobbin and Nick Stoller are doing is that you can sort of tell the passion's not entirely there necessarily, the nostalgic passion that they brought so well to the Muppets. You don't really get a sense of that within this film, and it's glaringly obvious in other films I've seen, the rebooted Ninja Turtles movies. I thought probably should have waited a little longer. Let's have a filmmaker who grew up with the Ninja Turtles and have their sensibilities, and maybe we'd have more of the cartoon Ninja Turtles than the comic Ninja Turtles, which we really only sort of got in the sequel. It would have been interesting, but we didn't get that. And although Michael Bay was almost involved in this but wasn't, or something, I don't know, whatever, I sort of don't care. This kind of follows that trend, but James Bobbin's a much better director than whoever the fuck did those Ninja Turtle movies. I think he understands he doesn't have that nostalgia for it, but it also takes on kind of a tried and true good concept at kind of taking a wackier, funnier cartoon concept and kind of adapting it to the real world or whatever. And you can sense that in this movie. They kind of take the Brady Bunch approach of having Dora being introduced to high school in the city, even though I think she was in another show that I've seen my daughter watch where she's in the city with her friends, which actually the star of this actually voiced a character in, interestingly enough, too. So this is ignoring the Dora canon, I guess. I find that interesting. That's just because that show airs pretty regularly on Nick Jr., that other show still. Usually when we erase things from the canon, we sort of stop airing them constantly, Nick Jr., but whatever. But I think that's a good premise to take. It has a lot more fun, this extremely positive girl in high school, I think is kind of a funny concept. I think this film has more fun when it's playing with the iconography of Dora than it is being just sort of a general adventure film, which it actually is quite good at. But I found that to be them having a lot more fun. Isabella Monier's performance was better when she's kind of within the bit that is this character. I thought she was really good at, and that was a lot of fun. And I like those Brady Bunch movies, actually. I kind of think it's a funny way to do it. If you just let's update them for the 90s or something, that would have sucked. But if you go, well, what if we actually took these extremely positive sitcom tropes and actually made them exist in the real world? It's funny. It's fun. You can do a lot of lamer things that you couldn't do and get away with them and make them a lot more clever because you're actually saying something about how that character works and everything like that. And they do a few things with her talking to the camera, like where little Dora, when you go to a flashback, says, "Can you say delicioso?" And she's like, we're working on that. Like, who is she talking to? And in the beginning, they sort of do that, like she's filming for something. Like, I was kind of imagining when they did that, I go, oh, she has a YouTube channel and she'll talk directly to the camera and stuff. But they didn't really like do that as much. They kind of just hinted at it. But like, whatever. I do enjoy those college humor shorts, which the guy I went to college with, Matt Pollock, directed, and I'm a fan of those. I thought that was a funnier concept. That played with it a little more. He did a really good job on those. You should check those out with Ariel Winter. But I do feel like when this film's within its bit and having Dora play off of people and Isabella Moner, it's a lot of fun. You know, I think they do a lot with that. No one actually says "Go Diego, go" in this, so I'm sort of calling bullshit on this whole movie, but whatever. Unless someone said it in the background. But it's like, how do you have a whole movie with that? With Diego. Everyone calls Dora the Explorer like 50 times. Diego's right there. I mean, I know he's the Luigi of the Dora franchise, but like, come on, guys. You say it once. I don't understand why that wasn't in the movie, but whatever. The whole concept is basically that she comes to the city. Diego has grown up and is like not the Diego we know from the show. He's a different Diego, and her and these group of teenage kids have to go get kidnapped because her parents send her to the city while they find the lost city of gold, and they have to, you know, go find the lost city of gold and like kidnap her to help them find her parents, or these, I'm not explaining this well. And Swiper's there, and they go on a stupid adventure. And in some ways, when they're on the adventure and playing off of each other, it's a lot of fun when you have those personalities clashing. But when they're just going on adventure stuff, it just feels very general. In some points, they're like doing things like a puzzle, like how Dora did it. It's interesting that a lot of these are like that one sequence in that Alicia Vikander Tomb Raider movie. It's very general Hollywood in a lot of sense, but it kind of has more fun with that and understands really what the concept of the show is. I would say in a lot of ways that's kind of my thing with this, is it's like a great adaptation by someone who was sort of assigned something and maybe probably doesn't really care that much, and I'm sort of fine with that. I think that that's cool. In the end, I think they do a good job with it, but you really feel it more in the adventure parts because it just felt very general in those senses, and it felt like maybe too general for what else was going on. I also wonder, like, you know, having nostalgia for your childhood, like your childhood cartoons or something, when you're in your 20s and 30s and like you haven't experienced them in a long time, I think is one thing, but I wonder how many high school kids like will want to see. I like that's something I like. It doesn't really adhere to the 20-year rule so much with this. I think it's not exactly been 20 years, so I think it's escaping it, but maybe that's not an exact science or something. So I don't. I'm sure many of you in the comments are like, I grew up with Dora and I love this movie, and like that's fine. I don't care. I mean, I do care. I want you to have a good time, and I think you would have a good time. This is a really entertaining movie. Benicio del Toro is the voice of Swiper. Danny Trejo has a very small part as Boots. I think a lot of families will have a lot of fun with this. And I liked Michael Pena's parts. He had a lot of great chemistry with his wife in the film, Ava Longoria, and I thought they were really fun. And this film is really good at making you laugh in like kind of a very family friendly way, but not in a way that you're like, oh, this is so lame. Like, this film actually, despite being a Dora the Explorer movie, doesn't feel very lame. It feels very fun and free, and like you're like kind of like ready to laugh with it, and you're like, oh, I'm seeing the Dora the Explorer movie. And it didn't come in with this film with like my arms crossed, but I understand like most audiences, much like the Jumanji movie or the Brady Bunch movie before it, they understand that like you're coming into this like second guessing it, and I think this film like really kind of shines in that, which I thought is really cool of it. I would watch this with my family if my family was interested. I don't think my daughter is at this time, but if she was and said I wanted to watch this, I'd be like, yeah, sure. I think this is a good family film if your family is into Dora. If you're not, then I don't see why you'd be watching this necessarily, and it sort of doesn't exceed that. I think James Bobbin and Nick Stoller do a good job of playing within the iconography, but I kind of feel like whatever happens to this franchise, if there's a sequel or something, I don't know. I hope Isabella Moner, I know Paramount, I always hear Paramount really likes her, and a lot of people want her to think she's going to be a bigger star. I would second that through this film. This is her first lead, to my understanding. I definitely liked her in this, and I sort of get that star quality throughout this film. She was really good, and the other kids were good. You know, no one's really bad in this, and it's not a bad movie. It's just sort of like a little bit above kind of a general Hollywood family-friendly film. And it's also, I think, co-written by a Monster Truck scribe, so bonus points, everybody. If you watch the video and you can say, hey, Jim mentioned Monster Trucks, you can put that in comments, and I'll small-hearted or something. In a lot of ways, a lot of the Hollywood family stuff is like really bad and like not really very watchable, like at all. Like I'm like embarrassed to have it on, and this I'm not embarrassed to have on, but I don't think it exceeds it and is this amazing triumphant thing. Like I thought the Muppet films like really got into the spirit of the Muppets and obviously represented something to him. It's sort of interesting seeing him go from a property that he cared so much about to a property that he's sort of just like stuck with and is like, I guess this is an assignment, I could have fun with it, sure. And he does really well. I think it speaks highly about him as a filmmaker, James Bobbin, and the writing of Nick Stoller, that they were able to do that. But anything else that's really done with this franchise, I hope they wait 10 years and find a filmmaker who grew up with this, and I'd like to see them mess with the iconography. It clearly doesn't represent anything to them. And so it feels like a really good Hollywood corporate movie that gets exactly what they need to do to make this kind of sing and make it enjoyable. They're not making that necessarily like that perfect kind of like, I guess, a Dora movie where it really like gets the importance of it. It felt like there were a lot of adults who were like, this is important to my kid, but like there's a difference between like, I should not be making a statement about like, you know, Bubble Guppies or Wally Kazam or Sunny Day or any, you know, Nella the Princess Knight or any of the shows my daughter watches. Like she should be making that statement in 20, 30 years. And I think that's kind of the thing that's robbed from Dora in this adaptation. I think it is very good under those circumstances, and I really think what it is very good. But I think like eventually someone, you can tell when you're watching it, someone will be able to do something more fun with it, and it is constantly like sort of making fun of itself and playing tongue-in-cheek and everything like that, not in a disrespectful way, which I think is really probably why this movie will go over very well. But I think there's someone who probably takes this, I'm not saying it should be serious, I think that'd be ridiculous, but it matters to them, and it grew up with them, and you know, she taught them some Spanish or how to explore for stuff or whatever that show did. I'm excited for that adaptation, but as for right now, I think this is as good as we're probably could have ever imagined we'd get, and it's probably, honestly, probably one of the better kind of family films that you could actually watch with a whole family that I've seen in a little bit, but just one you'd probably watch and maybe forget you all watched as a family. I don't think it would become a staple or anything. It's just like a fine, enjoyable family film, and that's probably the best you're probably going to get with a property like Dora the Explorer. So if you've seen Dora and the... So if you've seen Dora and the Lost City of Gold and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to.